In the feudal society of Frank Herbert Dune, the various planets and interstellar regions are governed by the noble houses of the Landsraad. Set some 20,000 years into mankind's future, much of the story of Dune revolves around the members of House Atreides, a house that has a long history beginning long before the start of Frank Herbert's series. In this video, I'd like to discuss a few of the notable events in the history of House Atreides that have contributed to its reputation and rise in popularity in the Landsraad, and how the members of this house shaped much of the Dune saga. Spoiler warning, as I will be covering the timeline of House Atreides leading up to and throughout Frank Herbert's series. The Atreides lineage is rumored to come from a noble family that originated in Greece on Earth. As such, House Atreides includes several figures from ancient Greek mythology. In the Expanded Universe novels, it is detailed that the earliest known ancestor of the house was Vorian Atreides, whose family rose to fame during the events of the Butlerian Jihad, a war which saw the banishment of all machines made in the likeness of a human mind. In the Expanded Universe books, it is detailed that Vorian was the biological son of a cyborg named Agamemnon. In an act of rebellion against his father and the thinking machines, Vorian aligned himself with the League of Nobles, a confederacy of several thousand free human systems. With his help, the League was able to attain victory in their war against the thinking machines, and as a result, Vorian's prestige and the family's popularity began to grow. Vorian adopted the hawk to serve as a symbol worn by military forces under his command, and from then on it would continue to be associated with the Atreides name. The ancient feud between the houses Atreides and Harkonnen began during the final strike against the thinking machines at the Battle of Corrin. In this battle, Abelard Harkonnen disobeyed an order from Vorian Atreides, resulting in Abelard's branding as a traitor and coward, as well as his subsequent banishment from the League's worlds to a harsh and cold water planet called Lankavale. This feud between the Harkonnens and Atreides would continue until the events of Frank Herbert's first book. Several generations later, when the Landsraad League was formed, Vorian's descendant, Willem, became the house's first official representative. For some 26 generations during their existence as a major house, the Atreides maintained the planetary fief on the lush, oceanic world of Caladan. The Atreides continue to maintain great prestige among the Landsraad, with a succession of strong and charismatic leaders. The people of Caladan saw great prosperity and spiritual satisfaction as the fair but firm hand of the Atreides ruling class contributed greatly to a well-organized society. The industrial levels were kept low on Caladan, assisting in their protection and maintenance of the planet's lush environment. Over the centuries under Atreides rulership, Caladan became a hub of creativity, art, and culture, producing great works of music, theater, and literature. In comparison to the harsh conditions of other worlds controlled by houses of the Landsraad, it is assumed that this idyllic environment caused the people of Caladan to grow soft and lose their edge. In spite of this perception, the Atreides also maintained a reputation for their proficiency in warfare, with the house's army being trained and led by a collection of the universe's best swordmasters, warmasters, and mentats. The Atreides military also formed and used its own battle language in order to ensure that communications could not be intercepted or recognized by enemies on or off the battlefield. In the years prior to the events of Frank Herbert's first book, Caladan was ruled by Paul's grandfather, the old Duke Paulus Atreides. While not overly formal, Paulus held the reputation of being an honorable man and proved to be a great leader. He was well respected by the Landsraad and beloved by the common people of Caladan. Paulus believed in the importance of developing strong bonds with commoners, emphasizing this to his son Leto by having him socialize and work alongside the planet's ordinary citizens. Much like the generations of Atreides that came before, the old Duke had a knack for inspiring loyalty in his men, many of whom faithfully served House Atreides for multiple generations. The old Duke was also a showman with a talent for drama. This quality ultimately led to his demise, as he died in a bullfighting spectacle. The bull that killed Paulus was put down, and its head was preserved, still covered in the old Duke's bloodstains. It was initially mounted in the dining hall of Castle Caladan, and when the Atreides were assigned to Arrakis, it was relocated to the keep at Arrakeen. Duke Leto carried on his father's legacy and proved himself to be an even-handed and compassionate leader. He won the loyalty of his father's advisors and generals, continuing to use them to bolster and train the Atreides military troops and serve as mentors to his son, Paul. Paul's primary teachers were the Mentat Master of Assassins Thufir Hawat, Sword Master of the Ginas Duncan Idaho, and War Master Gurney Halleck. Leto had ruled Caladan with Lady Jessica for nearly 2 decades when he received an order from the Emperor to relocate to Arrakis, where they would replace House Harkonnen and take over the planetary fief. This order came due to the Atreides' swift rise in popularity among the Landsraad, which the Emperor saw as a threat to his rule. It was no secret that this imperial order was a trap for the Duke, as both the Emperor and the Harkonnens held a vested interest in the humiliation of House Atreides. Leto did not shy away from this trap, instead seeing it as a chance to cement the Atreides' status as a powerhouse in the universe and to secure a better life for his son. The Duke's noble qualities and charismatic leadership resulted in the swift support from many of the minor houses and Fremen people of Arrakis after their arrival. The Duke met his end after being captured during the siege on Arrakeen by House Harkonnen with the aid of the Emperor's Sardaukar. Upon his capture, the Duke was given a poisoned tooth by his betrayer, Dr. Yue, which was designed to release a lethal toxin when bit, killing the Duke and anyone else in close proximity. However, it only partially worked, as it killed the Baron's twisted mentat, Piter de Vries, and a handful of others in the room, but not the Baron himself. The loyalty that the Duke inspired from his men would prove instrumental during the assault on Arrakeen, as many of them gave their lives to ensure the safety of the Duke's son, Paul, who was able to escape with his mother, Lady Jessica, into the desert. While Paul was much like his father, his mentors noted that he resembled the old Duke more closely in his conduct, manner, and speech. As a product of the Bene Gesserit's multi-generational breeding program, Paul had the capability of becoming a Kwisatz Haderach, which was a human male that possessed tremendous clairvoyant abilities, enabling him to predict events and steer the course of humanity's future with great precision. With these abilities, combined with the training he received on Caladan and the existence of ancient prophecies that were placed on Arrakis, Paul rose to become the sole leader of the Fremen, viewed as their messiah who would lead them to freedom. On Arrakis, Paul met and fell in love with the Fremen girl Chani, with whom he had a son named Leto II, who tragically was murdered in his infancy in a Sardaukar attack. Paul then led the Fremen in a campaign to overthrow House Harkonnen and the Imperial Sardaukar on the planet. At the end of this campaign, Paul was able to bring an end to the Carino Empire, crowning himself as emperor through a marriage of convenience to the emperor's daughter Irulan. However, he made it clear to Irulan that he would only give children to his beloved Chani. After Paul claimed the imperial throne, the Fremen spread across the known universe, unleashing a violent and relentless jihad over the course of 12 years. Through this jihad, the Fremen forced upon the masses their theology and customs, including the view of Paul as their godhead. This jihad resulted in the death of billions. As he struggled to come to grips with the reality of what had been unleashed in his name, Paul found himself increasingly isolated from his family and friends. During this time, he also oversaw the continuation of the Fremen's efforts to transform Arrakis from a harsh desert into a lush environment. As a result of his swift rise to power, Paul made many enemies from various discordant groups and organizations throughout the Empire. Despite the loss of his vision as a result of a nearby stone burner detonation, Paul's prescient abilities allowed him to continue to perceive the world around him. He was able to foresee the birth of his daughter, Ghanima, but was not able to see the birth of his second son, who was also named Leto. During this time, Paul's enemies continued to plot against him, leading to the poisoning and death of Chani. A grief-stricken Paul, who was then having severe doubts about his prescience, feeling frustrated and having no control, then disappeared into the desert, offering himself to the mighty sandworms, as was the custom for blind Fremen. Meanwhile, the Imperial House Atreides came under the regency of his younger sister Alia. Alia was considered abomination by the Bene Gesserit due to her inability to control the flood of ancestral memories set upon her while she was still in her mother's womb. Alia became corrupted by her considerable political power and gained a cult following. Shortly thereafter, she fell completely into abomination, tormented by the living personality of her ancestors, including possession by the ego memory of the evil Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, who was revealed to be Lady Jessica's father. Eventually, Paul would secretly return as a figure called the Preacher, who gained a following by speaking out against the Imperial House Atreides. He would then go on to reveal his true identity to his son Leto. As a Kwisatz Haderach, Paul had arrived a generation earlier than the Bene Gesserit had intended. As such, his son Leto II also held the potential for becoming such a being, and to an even greater degree. As a wielder of supreme prescience, Leto was able to see the golden path clearly, an optimum future that would ensure the survival of humanity. The steps required to lead humanity along this path, however, would call for a tyrannical, extended grip on power. In order to accomplish this, Leto would need to transform himself into a powerful human sandworm hybrid, becoming a nearly immortal being that could force his will upon the universe. Paul was able to make this transformation as well, but was unwilling to do so. As such, he left the choice of whether or not to enact the Golden Path to his son. Leto chose to accept the Golden Path and began his conversion into the sandworm hybrid. This resulted in a tremendous magnification of his strength, reflexes, and speed. After his metamorphosis reached a sufficient stage, Leto emerged from the desert and returned to the city of Arrakeen to confront his aunt Alia and claim the imperial throne. This confrontation, along with already rising tensions, caused Alia to commit suicide, and in the chaos that ensued, the preacher Paul was assassinated by her followers. Leto then claimed the title of God Emperor, arranging for a purely legal marriage to his sister Ghanima. Ghanima would go on to take Farad'n Carino as her mate, and their children would bear the Atreides name. During his reign, the God Emperor Leto began the reversal of the terraforming on Arrakis, reverting it back into a desert world. Leto eventually reached the point where his life would need to come to an end in order to continue humanity's traversal of the Golden Path. Before his death, he oversaw seeding of the Atreides genes into future generations, which brought forth a human species that, like him, was invisible to prescient vision. This invisibility to prescience was required in order to protect humanity from the control and ruination by any other clairvoyant beings. Although other descendants of the Atreides would continue to appear throughout the rest of the Dune saga, the history of House Atreides effectively ends with the death of Leto II. And although the Atreides Empire saw its end with Leto, their legacy and the religion of the God Emperor would continue to live on long after his passing. But I'm curious to know what you think of House Atreides. Are there any figures or events involving this noble house that stand out to you? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and be sure to subscribe for more Dune and other sci-fi and fantasy news and lore. Thank you all so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.